Hello, this is Arlene Perez, and this is a presentation on the central nervous system through the College of Science, Grand Canyon University, Physiology 1. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord. It is responsible for controlling sensory information like processing, collecting, and responding to information. The brain is made up of nervous tissue. Through processing and memory, the brain helps with responses, sensations, movement, emotion, and communication. The spinal cord is a critical part of the central nervous system. Located within the vertebral column, it is responsible for transferring messages from the brain to the peripheral body. In this presentation, we will discuss the central nervous system by understanding neuroglia cells, looking at an overview of the locations and function of the major brain regions, the structure and function of the meninges, the blood-brain barrier, the primary motor cortex, the primary sensory cortex and homuncula. We will look at the cortical pathways for speaking a word seen or heard, the cranial nerves, and dermatomes. Neuroglial cells, also known as glial cells, are abundant in the brain. They only take up half the space because, unlike neurons, they don't have axons or dendrites. They are not involved in synapses. However, they do relay information with neurons and themselves using chemical signals. Neuroglial cells provide support to neurons physically and metabolically. They are also utilized in keeping the environment necessary for neurons and their minimal limit necessary for neuronal function. They regulate synapses and are just as important to learning and memory as neurons are. There are 4 types of neuroglial cells: astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, and epidermal cells. Astrocytes are star-shaped cells that are the amplest of the glial cells. The astrocytes have many functions. They help stick the neurons together in their proper position. They aid in making and placing neurons during the formation of the fetal brain. They help with the development of the blood vessels that make up the blood-brain barrier. They bring nourishment from the blood to the neurons. They help in repairing the brain after injury by creating neural scars. They can stop chemical messengers of neurotransmitters by picking up and breaking them down. They take up potassium so that it can keep the necessary ion state for regular neuron excitability. They increase, make, and alter the making of synaptic communication. They also speak with neurons and each other through chemical signals bidirectionally, initially through gap junctions from the astrocyte and neurons, then extracellular through a chemical signal called a gliotransmitter. It can increase the amount of synaptic activity, which can be necessary in memory and learning. The latest finding in the function of the astrocyte is their job in removing toxic metabolic byproducts in the brain through the lymphatic system. It works much like the lymphatic system in our bodies, but since the lymphatic system does not function in the brain, the lymphatic system does the job. The oligodendrocytes are protrusion-like cells with a jelly roll-like wrap around the intraneuron axon in patches on the myelin formation. They create insulation through the myelin sheaths surrounding the axon of the central nervous system. Microglia is like the immune system for the central nervous system. They are similar to monocytes. They also originate from the bone marrow tissue in embryonic development. They move to the central nervous system and stay there till switched on by an infection or an injury. When idle, microglia cells let out small amounts of growth factors like nerve growth factors, letting neurons and glial cells remain and flourish. They are important in cutting down synapses during maturation and memory process. When foreign intruders or tissue waste is present, the branches move towards them and they remove them through phagocytosis. They also release damaging chemicals to attack a target. Ependymal cells are found in the lining of the fluid-filled cavities of the central nervous system. They help make the cerebrospinal fluid through the cells that line the ventricles. They assist with passing cerebrospinal fluid to the ventricles with cilia found on the ependymal cells. Similar to stem cells, the ependymal cells are often called the stem cells of the neural system. They have the ability to form into new glial cells or neurons. This is commonly seen after injuries. Locations and functions of major brain regions. The brain manages all the tasks of the body and translates the information being brought in from the outside. It is also involved with one's emotions, memories, creativity, and intelligence. The brain is made up of three parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. The cerebellum is the largest part of the brain. It is made up of a left and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. It carries out functions such as tough interpretations, hearing, speaking, fine motor skills, learning, cognitive thinking, and emotions. The cerebral hemispheres are divided into 4 lobes that are also divided into areas that work on specific tasks. However, they do not work independently, but together in a complex way. The frontal lobe is responsible for motor skills, fine motor skills, intelligence, personality, problem solving, and self-awareness. The parietal lobe is responsible for language understanding of the 5 senses. The occipital lobe is responsible for color, light, and movement of vision. The temporal lobe is responsible for language interpretation, hearing, memory, and organizational skills. The cerebellum is found under the cerebrum. It is used for the coordination of muscles, balance, and the maintenance of posture. The surface of the cerebellum is called the cortex and looks like hills and valley folds, which help with surface area, allowing there to be many neurons located inside for high-functioning capabilities. There are many billions of neurons in specific layers. Nerve cells make up the gray matter, and nerve fibers make up white matter. The brainstem is the connecting piece for the cerebrum and the cerebellum to the spinal cord. It sends messages to each. It is important for involuntary functions such as heartbeats, breathing, temperature regulation, sleep patterns, digestion, swallowing, coughing, sneezing, and vomiting. The meninges are the covering that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. There are 3 parts of the meninges: dura mater, arachnoid matter, and pia mater. The dura mater is a broad, strong, double layer. The peristeel layer binds the cranium, and the meningeal layer is under that. These layers assist with the passing of the veins and arteries that furnish blood to the brain. The arachnoid matter is a fine, web-like layer of connective tissue. It has no nerves or blood vessels. Under the arachnoid matter is the cerebrospinal fluid, which softens all of the central nervous system and continuously spreads around these structures to remove contaminants. The pia mater is also a fine membrane that clutches the exterior of the brain and ensures its shape. It has abundant amount of veins and arteries. It works with the ependymal cells to make cerebrospinal fluid. The blood-brain barrier is a body system used to protect the brain and the central nervous system. Near the brain, the Endothelial cells are arranged close together, not allowing a lot of particles to pass through the blood that enters the brain and central nervous system. It restricts the entry of bloodborne materials into the exposed brain tissue. They can also divert particular hormones floating around that work like neurotransmitters from getting to the brain where they could cause unwanted nerve activity. The primary motor cortex functions to create signals that will allow the movement of the body through the skeletal muscles. It is located in the frontal lobe behind the central sulcus. It is also responsible for the coordination and stabilization of the body's posture. The primary sensory cortex detects sensations like touch, pain, body position in relation to space and temperature. It is found in the postcentral gyrus in the parietal lobe. Homunculi is the area around the cerebral cortex that represents each part of the body. The senses will be sent from the body to the spinal cord and back to the brain. The cortical pathway for speaking a word seen or heard is as follows. To speak a word from reading or hearing is complex. You need to express the idea of speaking and understand the word from speech to occur. Broca's area and Wernicke's area are the areas for language in the central nervous system. Broca is found in the left frontal lobe by the motor area of the cortex where muscles needed for speech are. Wernicke's area in the left cortex is where the parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes meet. Wernicke's role is crucial in comprehending words that are both written and spoken. It is also responsible for making logical forms of speech so that it can be moved to the Broca's area with parcels of fibers. This then allows the ability for speech to occur. Wernicke's area also gets messages from the visual cortex in the occipital lobe as well as the temporal lobe, which is used for hearing. This allows for the understanding when a word is spoken. Communication from the brain to the body occurs through the spinal cord and the cranial nerves. There are 12 cranial nerves. 10 of the cranial nerves are responsible for hearing, movement of the eye, feeling to the face as well as the facial movement, taste, swallowing, and movement of the neck, tongue, and shoulders. These occur through the brainstem. The cranial nerves that are responsible for seeing and smelling come from the cerebrum. The following are the main functions of the 12 cranial nerves as listed by the Mayfield Brain and Spine Anatomy of the Brain. 1. Olfactory, smell. 2. Optic, vision. 3. Ocular motor, eye pupil movement. 4. Trochlear, eye movement. 5. Trigeminal, face senses. 6. Absence, eye movement. 7. Facial, face movement and saliva formation. 8. Vestibulo-cochlear, hearing and balance. 9. Glossopharyngeal, taste and swallowing. 10. Vagus, digesting and heart rate. 11. Accessory, head movement. 12. Hypoglossal, moves tongue. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord. It controls responses and functions throughout the body. Through various nerve cells, parts of the brain, and a large network of nerves, fibers, and tissues, many of the body's functions, both voluntary and involuntary, are possible. Through protection, such as the blood-brain barrier, only very selective molecules and chemical responses can penetrate the brain. It is a remarkable system that allows us to do everyday functions that we take for granted. The following is a list of the references utilized for this presentation. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.